Welcome to Season 2 of the SOAR podcast, the place for creative entrepreneurs who want to build healthier, happier, more profitable self-employed businesses. I'm your host, Ray Hyde Cornell, business mentor at Chiron Consulting and CEO and senior copywriter at Cornell Content Marketing. Get ready to soar. Welcome to the SOAR podcast. And today we have Nicole Lewis-Keeber. Nicole, tell our listeners all about you and what you do and what your business is.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, so I actually started my career as a therapist. I have a master's degree in social work. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I had about 18 years in the field. You name it, I have done it. Everything from EAP work to couples counseling, mental health, substance abuse. There's really not a community I haven't had some hand in, except for children. I never worked with kids specifically. And my business currently is it's more of a coaching business, and it's really interesting this journey going from therapist to coach, because a lot of my therapist friends back in the day when I first left kind of had a raised eyebrow to say, "What are you doing coaching?" Because they weren't exactly sure what it was about. I think we know a little bit more now, and I just really love what I do. But when I left after 18 years of being in the field, I was really burnt out because I help people with this intersection of childhood trauma and entrepreneurship and business ownership and self-care. And my industry, we were not taught to care for ourselves. Burnout was very high when you're in a service-based profession. And so I was really burnt out. I needed to figure out how I could still work with people in more of a motivational way and maybe less of a pathological, because we kind of pathologize, normal ways of being as humans under a lot of stress, right?
Totally. Yep.
And there's so much stigma around it. And so I found the world of coaching and began my journey here to having a business where I started doing money mindset coaching for business owners, entrepreneurs. And what I was beginning to see really early out in my business is that my clients did not have a mindset issue. They had tried everything. They'd read the books, they'd learned mindset tricks. But what evolved is that they were actually having their childhood trauma responses were playing out in their money. And so that really sent me on a journey of doing research and exploring the intersection of childhood trauma, what it is, normalizing it, and helping people liberate themselves from it, because it was implanting itself in their businesses and the structures of their businesses, how they run them, how they engage with their clients, and most importantly, how they treat themselves with their business. So it's always kind of hard to say, this is exactly what I do, because it's coaching, it's education, it's training, it's research, and it's been a pretty interesting journey. And this last part of it has been getting trained with Dr. Brené Brown to facilitate her Dare to Lead processes, because her work and my work are very aligned. Mm-hmm. And as someone who was very much a thought leader in shame and vulnerability, as she was, I was very much a thought leader in the intersection of trauma outside of mental health. People would tell me, don't use the trauma word, you're going to scare people. And I said, we have to call a thing a thing. We don't drop our baggage, so to speak, at the door when we start a business. That's inaccurate. So we have to help people understand all the factors that are at play to help them have not only a financially successful business, but also an emotionally sustainable one as well.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me that this seems like an increasingly common trajectory where mental health professionals, which I have a mental health background, other guests on the podcast, Shulamit Berlatov, Amy McNally, and now you, we all had a very similar experience where we went into the mental health world. We wanted to help people. We wanted to help them move forward. And we felt like this mental health world is just so I love the word that you use, pathological. It's just so steeped in negativity and stigma. And there's like this wet blanket over the entire industry. And all of us, without knowing each other, we all went on similar paths to go, screw that. I want to actually help people. I'm going to break these chains of the bureaucracy of the mental health world, go out on my own and help people be more forward thinking, help them get into more of a solution focused mentality. And that's not to discount what they went through in the past, but it's not dwelling in it. It's not ruminating in it. It's okay, this happened. Let's heal from that and let's take steps forward. And so this idea that, and I love that you call it little t trauma or small t trauma, this idea that trauma is pervasive, especially in the entrepreneurial world, is something that I see every day with the freelancers that I work with and the self-employed business owners that I work with. Oftentimes we get into this line of work because of that, either big T or little t trauma. And I mean, my book that came out earlier this year, Corporate Dropouts, every single chapter in that story has an instance of either little t or big T trauma. And everyone then went on to say, I don't want to be beholden to someone else. I don't want to be under someone else's thumb. I want to live my life on my terms. And so, in your work and in your research, how have you seen? Can you give us some examples of how trauma in either form, little t, big T, shows up in business? Because I think for the on paper, that kind of like objective listener is going to go, no, those are two wildly different things. They can't possibly overlap. Or, keep your baggage at home. Like, don't bring that shit to work.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're humans. Those things are going to bleed together. So what has been your experience with that?
Right. I was thinking as you were talking that I think part of the problem that we had in the mental health field is that we were never solving the right problem. And I find that in business as well. We were trying to help people with the symptoms, but there was very rarely any conversation about all of these adaptations they were trauma adaptations, right? It's depression due to trauma, substance abuse due to trauma, anxiety due to trauma, and that we were trying to solve the wrong problem because we were not naming what it was, right? We were kind of avoiding it, skirting it for whatever reason. Right. And I think that I find this in the business world as well, because what I have seen is that a childhood experience that is traumatic to us can change everything, right? And so let's back up a little bit and just define that small t, big T really quickly for anyone who isn't quite familiar with that term. We as a culture, we tend to only assign a very, very small slice of what trauma is and allow people to call it that, right? Mm-hmm. And we call those big T. They're usually, violence, child abuse, PTSD, catastrophic illness, accident, these bigger kind of explosive events that
are truly life-threatening things in life. Yes.
Exactly. But if I took my microphone and went out on the street and asked people what trauma is, that is invariably what people will tell you, right? Mm-hmm. But there's also, I think, a more pervasive, cumulative, and impactful trauma that we deal with. So calling it little t is really not, it's probably not as accurate as it could be. These smaller T traumas, they are cumulative in nature. They are things that most people would not look at as trauma, but our nervous system doesn't really give a crap what you call it. And the nervous system knows what it knows, right? And so these were experiences where we felt unsafe, unseen, unheard, left out, lost connection with people. And that can be anything from being bullied, having a learning difference like I did growing up in school. Every day I felt disconnected and I internalized my inability to learn in a system that couldn't teach me as my problem, right? That changes you. Yeah. It changes what you feel is available to you. Losing a friend group, the tweens are hard. Mm. Having a parent who's chronically ill, moving around a lot, being alone, all of these things can be small t trauma, and they are cumulative in nature, and they add up to change what we see as possible for ourselves. And those adaptations that we then have become a part of our DNA, basically. And so I always say that big T trauma explodes, little T trauma erodes, but they are both
Mm.
powerful enough to move a mountain. One can explode it all of a sudden, and the other one can erode it over time, but they are very, very powerful. So to think that we have these experiences that, first of all, we have not even identified as trauma because we have been kind of stigmatized and shamed into seeing it that way, has run unchecked. And so we have to modify our lives in order for us to get ahead. So we have these experiences where, as children, we say, I never want to feel this way again. I'll show you that I can be the person that you think I can't be. I never will let anyone tell me what to do ever again. So I will always be in control. We make these internal vows when we have these experiences when we're younger. And those vows then become a business plan, an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
And, every day I see the birth story of these businesses and entrepreneurial journeys and desires for leadership are, in essence, a desire to go back and fix and change that experience that they had.
Yes. And
And
there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. There's
nope,
nothing
not at
wrong
all.
with an experience that you had in life or an accumulation of experiences you had in life leading you to make a
Mhm.
big decision and to basically composite into being your entrepreneurial business plan.
Mhm.
But what is wrong with that is when we fail to recognize and heal the initial wounds that caused us to go down these pathways. Because it's
Mhm.
like, I liken it to when you go to a doctor and you say, hey, I've got some back pain. And he goes, oh, okay, here's some Percocet. Well, the Percocet is just going to numb the pain. It's just going to mask the symptom. It's not actually healing the problem. What really you should be doing is not sitting at your desk all day or eating less inflammatory foods or doing some yoga or whatever it might be. Maybe you need back surgery. Who knows what it is? But the Percocet is just the band-aid. It's the cover up of the problem. And so when you're talking about how these little T traumas and big T traumas
Mhm.
can spark our path into entrepreneurship, that can actually be a blessing. It can be the
Yeah,
first step in healing,
it
but you
absolutely
have to
can
do
be.
that work to go back and actually heal the
Yeah.
wounds, and just plowing forward like, a bull out of the gate and being like, oh, I'm never going back there. I'm never going to look at it again. It's just going to let those wounds erode. I
Yeah.
love that analogy that you said, big T trauma explodes, little T erodes. It's just going to let it erode you further and
Yeah.
further.
It'll come out sideways. Like eventually it catches up with us. And you're absolutely right. We're, like I said earlier, we're solving the wrong problem. So when we can get clear about what the real challenge is or what the real opportunity is, then we can give ourselves the relief that we are actually looking for with
Yeah.
the business. Because I do believe that you can heal through your business, that it can be an arena for that if you know what it is that you were trying to give that younger version of yourself. And let's face it, all the skill sets that we get from having these challenging journeys, they create amazing skill sets for entrepreneurship. They
Yeah.
really do. We're, like to be in charge and have a high tolerance for discomfort and out of the box thinkers. So, it can be a blessing and it can be a curse. And so my desire is for people really to understand, what was the motivation, what is my real why to start my
Yeah.
business, I call it, so that we can give you the relief so that more money, more success, more employees, bigger company, you keep hitting these benchmarks and you don't feel better, don't feel safer, you don't feel more seen, that we can actually get you the relief and the emotional sustainability that you're looking for through your business. So you can have that, right? If you know what it is, you can have it.
Exactly. I mean, it's like if someone finds their path to entrepreneurship, and I literally envision this as a path in the forest, like a dusty dirt path, and they're dragging all of these stone blocks behind
Mhm.
them that are the trauma that inspired them to break through that wall and get to this path, but now they're lugging them along. And if you actually face those traumas, heal them, and let go of that energy, you release that energy that you have been spending in the past, dragging these things with you, then as soon as those ropes are cut, think about how much farther you can go, how much faster you can go, how much easier and more enjoyable that journey is.
Mhm. And sometimes people end their journey. Sometimes they recognize, I started this business to, stick it to my dad. And now that I don't need that anymore, I recognize that this business wasn't for me and I don't want it. And so there's liberation in that as well. In this process, you could, pick it up and put it over here on the career journey that you choose, the relationships that you find yourself in. This is not, so it's in all spaces, which is why I think it's important for us to bring more conversation to this intersection of, we have a lot of, as Brene says, we have a lot of leaders working out their shit on their people.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not trauma conscious. They are not aware of their own wounds and their own shame. And so they're working out their stuff on all the people around them. And I see this happening in businesses. And I see this happening a lot with entrepreneurs that I work with who it disrupts the relationship that they have with their staff, but also, more importantly, people that they contract with, because they will sabotage the employees or the contractors that they bring in, and then say, well, see, I can't hire anybody, I can't trust anybody because that project didn't work out. But really what they've been doing is sabotaging that person so they can't do their job the whole time, not on purpose, because relying on someone to have a part of their business feels very unsafe to them because they have unchecked trauma in their business as well. So the tendrils are very long when it comes to how trauma can show up in your business.
Yes. And that really speaks to an idea that popped into my head earlier. Was, you were listing out all of these great qualities of entrepreneurs, and others that popped in my head were resilience and self-reliance. And I think that self-reliance is so connected to trauma that we think, something happened to me in the past, I can't trust someone, I can't rely on someone, I only have myself to rely on. And that's a great thing, because you're not giving up. You're saying, I have myself to count on, I only have myself, and I'm going to make this work, I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to do it on my own, I don't care how hard it is or how long it takes. And then we get to the point where we go, okay, I want to build an agency, or I just want some help. I just need a bookkeeper. I just need a VA. I just need one subcontractor who can help me out with this stuff. But there's an element of trust in bringing someone into your business, this business that was literally created as your own protective bubble. And to your point, it's not a conscious decision that we're sabotaging this person, but it's a self-protective mechanism that, when you look at it in that way, of course, you would want to have reasons to get this person out of your business and to go back to it just being you. Because what if they betray you? What if they drop the ball? What if they don't come through for you?
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to just do it alone, even though that's really hard, as opposed to counting on someone else.
Exactly. We have to help you increase your window of tolerance for relying on someone else to do something. And that can be really hard. And, I always say that, relying on someone is the behavior of trust. And if there's a trust fracture or a trust trauma in your background, which I think is one of the biggest things that people who have trauma struggle with, it can be really hard. And so sometimes I think, some conventional advice is, hire employees. You shouldn't be doing this yourself. You're the CEO, or, let other people take over these tasks. And I think sometimes people are advised to bring on employees or contractors in a way that is too much too soon. But if we know that trust is one of the challenges that comes up for you because of your trauma, then we're going to look at it from a trauma-informed standpoint and say, we need to increase your window of tolerance for this. So we're going to figure out what is the least, what's the least difficult person to bring on, and starting with delegation and seeing how that trust builds out. But when we tell people just go do all the things, just like when I was doing money mindset coaching around money trauma, telling people to double and triple their rates without helping them increase that window of tolerance for that change in the income or that change in their prices, it'll backfire. It really will. And so I think that, this is why this is so important. In my research with the entrepreneurs and business owners that I've talked to for the past 5 years, one of the categories, so to speak, that this trauma shows up in a lot is trust. And there's so many ways that it does, but trust is one of them for sure.
Yeah. So I want to get more into that. We're going to take a quick commercial break to drop some resources for our listeners, and we'll be right back. Hey, this is Ray. Ready to build a business that supports a life you love, a life you've always dreamed of? It's time to stop passively dealing with what's right in front of you and start deliberately designing your own future. That's exactly what we do in private business mentoring. You and I work together to create a completely custom to you business model that gives you everything you want and need while protecting you from stress and burnout. Ready to get started? Go to chironconsulting.us/mentoring to learn more. There you can also book a free call with me so we can start getting to know each other and see if mentoring is right for you. Plus, I love working with early stage entrepreneurs. That's why my mentoring packages are priced so low. I want you to soar. So don't worry about having to shell out thousands of dollars. Not here. Just go to chironconsulting.us/mentoring to learn more. And we're back. Okay, so this is just an absolutely fascinating topic to my, psychology obsessed brain. And I want to make sure, because I think by now, people listening to this episode, they're probably going, check, check, check. That's me, that's me, that's me. I recognize myself in that and that and that and that and that. So I don't want to leave people on a cliff. I want to tell people this is where you can get started. So, what would be some of the initial, maybe like thought exercises or journaling exercises, or just what do you recommend? How do people even get started? Because even though we're talking about little t trauma, it seems like this is huge. This feels massive and it feels scary. And so no wonder we all just want to shut the door on the monster in the closet and lock it in there and then just, plow forward working on our computers. Where do we even begin?
Well, a healthy dose of self-compassion goes a long way because, full transparency, I was a therapist in a therapist's office, still minimizing my own trauma because I didn't think it matched up to other people. So no comparative suffering here. And having some self-compassion is a really great place to start, and to begin to notice, what is coming up for you, and stay open to this idea, because this is already operating in your life without your awareness, or maybe you are aware of it, you just didn't know what it was. And so this is actually a really cool opportunity for you to begin to learn a little bit more about yourself, and to give yourself some of the things that you actually need and want to help you have a business that feels like more emotionally sustainable, as opposed to big and scary. And so one of the things I love to ask people to do first is, I was talking about the relationship that you have with your business, because you are not your business. That's the very first thing to know. So kind of assess where you're at there. Say, do I feel like I am my business? You are not your business. It's something that you are relating to. It is something that you are creating outside of yourself. And because of that, we are very prone to replicate those roles in relationship patterns from our past into our business. And so I always ask people to think of, if you were to think of your business as a person outside of you, what does it feel like? Does it feel demanding? Does it feel like critical, like too much? And if so, where have you felt that way before in your life? Is there a particular person that stands out for you, or an experience? It could have been a friend you had in high school that was a bully. It could have been your teacher. It could have been your father, mom, caregiver. And dig a little bit deeper into the current relationship that you have created with your business. This is something that I did myself in my business 2 years in. I realized I had created a very, for lack of a better word, abusive relationship with my business, because for all intents and purposes, its energy was my mom, who was very critical of me. And so I was then using my business to replicate this pattern of, this person, this business has all of the energy, all of the power, and I don't. And when I was able to see that, I began to change the relationship with it. But I had no idea that I had defaulted into this old pattern in this new kind of scary big thing, right? And so I always ask people to consider the relationship you have now with your business. Who might it be? And then think about the relationship that you'd like to have. How do you want to be supported? How do you want to feel about it? Is there anyone that you've met in your life that made you feel that way? And begin to change the relationship and the dynamic that you have, so that those patterns are feeling supported, and cared for with your business, which is what we're wanting, right? We're wanting it to
Yeah.
support us, can be within your reach. And this is something I do a lot in my practice. And I have a book called Love Your Business that you can read a little bit more about that. Yeah, but it's one of the very first things that I take people to, because they don't recognize that their business is something outside of them. And so they're internalizing everything, and it really impacts their boundaries, their money, all of it, right?
Yeah.
It's not your baby. I don't want my business to be a baby. I want it to be a fully formed partner in, to get this stuff done. So I think that's where I like people to start. Plus, it's kind of whimsical to think about the relationship that you could have, and who your business entity or person could be in a supportive and loving relationship.
I love this idea. And it's so funny because I do a lot of personification with my clients on both sides of my businesses. Within the content marketing side, anytime I'm working with like a new client on copy, I ask them to tell me, like, if your business were a person, if your subscription box were a person, what would they be like? Are they quiet? Are they outgoing? Are they stoic? Are they adventurous? Tell me about them. And then on the Chiron side, when we do money mindset work, I ask people to envision money as a person. And what is your relationship with money? And yet I've never looked at my own businesses as people. I've never personified my own businesses. And it's interesting because as you were saying this, and I'm a little reluctant to share like my own personal thought process here, but I think it might actually be helpful for someone listening. Is I was thinking about this as you were talking, and I realized if I were to think of Cornell, my content marketing agency, as a person, I really can't liken it to another person in my life, but I can liken it to the exact same relationship that I had with school, where
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I am going to plow through these courses. I'm going to do my absolute best. I'm going to get the A. Nothing else is acceptable. I'm going to pile on my plate. I mean, I graduated high school when I was 16. I got my bachelor's degree in 3 years, and then I went on to get 2 more master's degrees in like record time. I mean, that's what I did. I piled it on. And now I'm in this place in my businesses where I really want to spend more time on the Chiron side. I want to build more workshops and I want to work with more clients. And I'm like, but Cornell is demanding so much of my time and energy. And I'm realizing now, wait, actually, that's something that I'm doing. I piled on the course load. I piled on the homework assignments. Nobody said I had to finish school that quickly. Nobody is saying I have to take on this many projects in the Cornell side.
Mm-mm.
Nobody. I'm doing that to myself. And so even just in this brief, conversation we're having in this podcast episode, that's a huge epiphany for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, is that in your experience with your clients going through this mental exercise, is that common for them to have that sort of epiphany from this
Mm-hmm.
personification exercise and then go, holy shit, okay, now
Yeah.
a whole world of possibilities just opened up because I really am in control?
Yeah, it's true. And the same thing happened with me when I first recognized all this. I won't go into the story because it's too long. It's in the book. But because it is a long story. But what I recognized myself was, every morning I woke up feeling like I was a failure, like I had not done
Mm,
enough. Like my clients were fine, but I wasn't doing enough for them. I wasn't bringing in enough revenue, all the stuff. And the thought was, they're not happy.
mm,
And then when I realized that that's an invisible they, there
yeah,
is no they. This is my business. I have the power to create it and set it up in the way that works for me. I can have what it is that I need here. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, if I'm feeling beat up by it, there's no one else here but me. I set it up to do that. So if I can make it this way, I can dismantle it and I can change the energy of it. And,
yeah.
with that exercise, I do tell people, I'm like, it may be a person, it may be an energy, like you talked about
Mm,
school. And what is so beautiful, and I love this process so much, is that when people change the relationship entity of their business, this personification, which I love that you do, to something that feels better and to them. Sometimes it's a dog, sometimes
Yeah.
it's their aunt, sometimes, like for me, it was the Muppet of Christmas Present on the, the Christmas, present spirit on the Muppet movie. When you go through the process, you really kind of look at all the characteristics, how you want to feel, and the persona comes to you, and it could be an energy, a color, a tree, whatever. So it kind of starts out as a message that can be connected to a person or experience, but it turns into something a little bit more beautiful. And this personification process is so useful because we are wired for connection, right? And we're also wired for story. Like our brains want to know who the good guys are, who the bad guys are. And in the absence of data, as Brené Brown says, we will fill that in, right? And so that's why this process, I think, works so well, because of the way that we are geared towards learning and expressing ourselves in the world. So it's a little woo, or a little like, I went through this with an IT group, and they're like, I don't know if I really feel like I could love my business. I feel like I could like it, or we could be friends. But after we did it, and I could show them, how this is actually a legitimate process to take people through. It's not just fairy tale. They loved it, and they really got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's woo at all. In fact, it resonates as very not clinical. The problem that I have with the mental health world is that it's so clinical that it's sterile. It's devoid of human connection. But what you've done is you've taken all of that clinical research, you've married the human component to it. And now all of a sudden we have this holistic kind of exercise, and the personification of it. Ultimately, what we want are all the human things. We want freedom, we want vitality, we want health, we want abundance, we want comfort, we want love, we want companionship, we want all of those things. I have never spoken to anybody who wants something like, I want more, oh gosh, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to go back in my research, psychological research brain, and pick out something just like totally clinical. I want some double-blind case studies of, customers who are extremely happy with our product and, got great results. Fuck no. Like, people want happiness. They want fulfillment. They want the human things. And so what you're doing is really bringing back that human component to business. And it's funny because at the beginning of our episode, I was thinking, oh, you know what? I need to ask her about the term that you use, business therapist. What is a business therapist? And yet now I don't even have to ask you, because I understand completely from this conversation what you're talking about. Now, the last thing I want to ask, no, there are two more things I want to ask you. One is my fear, and this is like my protective anti-mental health world, side coming out. My fear is that in dredging up all of this, we can get easily caught in this like back channel of dredging up the past and reprocessing and reanalyzing all of the traumas. And when you take into consideration little t traumas, especially for female entrepreneurs, there are mega fuckloads of little t traumas in our histories. And how do we not get sucked into that past, and how do we give it the attention it deserves while still moving forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I get asked that a lot because people are reluctant or afraid. And, when you're combining this with business, the stakes are high. And, what I always like to tell them is like, yeah, the stakes are high. And this is happening to you anyway. Right? It's coming out sideways. I always say it kind of bleeds out. It's impacting the decisions that we make, the burnout that we experience in our businesses. Our nervous system is still doing this work, whether we are aware of it or not. And so there is no choice of not doing the thing. It is doing the thing in a way that can provide relief and support and change and adaptation to build that resilience and to begin to heal and release, some of these things. And the good news is that most of our patterns are pretty similar. We don't have to dig through everything. In fact, we can dig through, something that, happened in the past 6 months in your business that you're like, oh, it's such a pattern. I see this happening, or, why did this happen? We can work on that one. And you're probably going to get some insight as to where it began, We don't have to deal with every single episode or experience of it, because that's the beauty of that too, is that it'll trickle down into, all those experiences. So it is difficult. It can be scary, which is why I think that you have to go slow. You need to have trained support to help you with it. It is okay to dip your toe in and then come back out. I never put timelines on people that I work with in my Do No Harm program. We've got to go at the pace that we go at, because we all have different types of trauma. Maybe you are neurodivergent and growing up, and you didn't find a way to fit in. Like, we all have our different stuff, and so it's not a one size fits all necessarily. But I've also found that when people can see that this is to the benefit of their business, that it actually motivates them a little bit more. And that if they want to become more trauma conscious, so they're doing no harm to themselves, but also to their business, and also the people that we're working with, because the people that we work with also have trauma. Because if you're working with human beings, trauma is in the equation. Yeah. That there's a motivating factor, I think, for that helps people stay in it, right? And that they know that they're not alone in it. But I don't really recommend that people do this work with a short timeline or without any kind of support. So I routinely make referrals to therapists. I have therapists who've been through my Do No Harm program that can hold space for it. I just really don't think it's something that, if you want to do a deep dive in it, that you should do alone. Or it's different for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the good news is, and you mentioned this, that I firmly believe that when things happen in our lives, almost with this recurring pattern, it's because the universe is trying to get us to learn a lesson.
It's true.
And the universe is bonking us over the head harder and harder and harder each time. Like, hey, pay attention. I need you to learn this lesson. And oftentimes we don't have to go through every single one of those bonks in our past to understand the lesson, the wisdom, the information we're needing to extract from that. We just have to get it. And once we get it, we're free of it, and we can move forward and let those things go. It's not like they're still sitting on the shelf, tapping us on the shoulder saying, hey, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. Once you get the message you're meant to get from that, it dissipates, it loses its weight. You're no longer dragging it behind you. Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to ask you, because you've mentioned Brene's name a few times, and I know our listeners who are big Brené Brown fans are just going to totally burn me at the stake if I don't ask you about this. Tell me about your work with Brené Brown. What are you doing with her, and what's this program? Tell us all about it.
Oh, yeah. So I am a big fan of hers. She's a social worker, and I was following her path. Because again, she was out there, talking about shame and vulnerability, and people were telling her, don't use the word shame if you're going to come talk to our people. Yeah. And I had a lot of that early out in my business, of people telling me not to use the T word. And so she was a real guiding light and mentor for me, to help me just say, stick and stay, do it, call a thing a thing. We have to do this. And so an opportunity came up to train with her several years ago, and I applied. And so I was accepted, and there was, I think 20% of the applicants were accepted. And so I felt really blessed to be able to do this. And so I went to San Antonio and spent 3.5 days with her. And we all spent time with her learning how to facilitate her Dare to Lead processes, which are, part of her book, Dare to Lead, and that she's taken into all these companies and, big industries. And it was beautiful. And she is just as you think in person as she is on the screen. She's funny, she's irreverent, she's smart, she's a beautiful speaker, beautiful human. And since then, I have been facilitating Dare to Lead cohorts for people who want to become Dare to Lead trained. I'm a facilitator, but they can become Dare to Lead trained with us. And I do about 2 a year, and we have quarterly Zooms with her, and hopefully someday we'll be able to do Courage Camp again in person in Texas. And it's been a really beautiful and fantastic experience to be a part of the Beadberg team.
You are involved in so many incredible things, between your work with Brene, your own program, your Do No Harm program, your book. Tell our listeners where they can learn more about you, check you out, and work with you if it feels right.
Yeah, so if you love TikTok, I'm on there as at the business therapist. You can find me on my website. I think the links will be in the show notes as well. I'm also on Instagram, Nicole.Lewis-Keeber. So I'm pretty out there on social media. I also have some articles I've written on Medium, so you can find me there by using my name. So I'm around.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Nicole. This was powerful.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Ray here again. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and rate us in your favorite podcasting platform. Want to be a guest on the show or know someone who has an amazing story of entrepreneurship? Apply on our website at chironconsulting.us/podcast.